The United States has a record debt of $36 trillion. Its infrastructure in most of its major cities is crumbling.
Fake infrastructure that's caused massive inflation and no benefit.
Hundreds of thousands of Americans are homeless and drug addicted, and yet it's been wasting money everywhere. On transgender operas in Colombia, DEI musicals in Ireland, and trying to find out what makes sunfish more aggressive, tequila or gin. The Trump administration says those wasteful days are over. The Department of Government Efficiency, aka DOGE, is cleaning up government spending, aiming to save hundreds of billions of dollars.
The future is gonna be amazing!
Musk may think so, but there are still many who don't agree.
12 days ago, people knew where their next paycheck was coming from. They knew how they were going to pay for their kids' daycare, their medical bills, and then all gone overnight. People are really scared.
Hello and welcome to the Nexus. Today we're discussing America's new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, led by Elon Musk. And we have two guests with very different opinions. You just saw there Kristina Drye in that little clip at the beginning talking about how she was fired by DOGE. And we also have Scottie Nell Hughes, who is a Republican commentator who thinks DOGE is great for America. Welcome to both of you. Kristina, may I start with you? You've become one of the more famous cases of being fired by DOGE. Can you tell us what kind of work you were doing?
So, of course, I was a speechwriter in the front office for USAID, and I spent my days writing about the work we did around the world, from the, assistance we brought to Ukraine as they fought, Putin's brutal invasion, to the humanitarian assistance we brought to people in Sudan, to the healthcare needs of people around the world. So every single day I'd go in and engage with, our partners here and abroad and communicate that to the American people and then people that were receiving our assistance and supporting our assistance as well.
And you were writing speeches for the head of USAID or USAID, Samantha Power. Were you told why you were fired?
Yeah, so I spent 2.5 years writing for Administrator Power, and I was not told why I was terminated. I was sent an email Wednesday morning, February 5th, and it said that my services were no longer needed, and that was it.
And your boss was gone too? Everybody in that department gone?
Yeah, so the way that it works in the government system, and I think this is important for folks to understand, is people like Administrator Samantha Power are politically appointed by the president, and then there are groups of folks that are also politically appointed. They are legally required to leave at noon the day of the inauguration. So they were already out the door because their political appointeeship was legally over. Then there are groups of people that work at USAID full time, and they work across administrations. I was one of those folks, and so I wrote for Administrator Power for 2.5 years and was very prepared and willing to write for whoever the new administrator or acting administrator would be. And I never ended up writing for them because my job was terminated when they basically ended USAID.
So, Scottie, what do you make of Kristina's case? Are you sympathetic?
Absolutely. I'm sympathetic with anybody who loses a job. But Kristina, I have to ask you, writing for USAID, being in America over the last few years, you've seen layoff after layoff after layoff in the private sector. So you knew when there was a regime change that it could be a possibility. Were you offered that 8-month severance package that a lot of all federal employees were offered by Elon and Donald Trump originally?
Great question. So I was not offered that severance at all. So the way USAID works, it is 90% earmarked by Congress, and we do a lot of our work through contracting. So you would be employed by a contractor, but you do not meet the contractor. You do not talk to the contractor. They're the HR that provides the paycheck. However, I was in the office every single day, had a .gov email, had my computer, had my phone, traveled with Administrator Power when we gave speeches, had my office in the building. So I worked with and for USAID, like many, many, many people in that building because of the earmarking we have. People that were under a contractor did not receive the fork email, only what we call direct hires, which are the very few people that are employed directly by USAID. So I didn't receive any severance. I didn't receive any offer to have that 8-month fork email.
So Kristina, sorry, does that mean that you weren't working directly for USAID? You were working for a contractor for them to support USAID administration?
Yeah, so I was a USAID contractor, worked in the building every single day, but like most folks at USAID was through a contract.
Does that mean you're still working for the contractor?
No, they terminated me from that contract the day that they terminated, or USA terminated the contract with them.
Scott, it's just that, when you were looking at the CBS interview, it gave the impression to the public watching that you actually worked directly for USAID. And then, as I understand it, people, especially from the more conservative or the right-leaning side of things, said that that was essentially something concocted in order to give you greater credibility as you criticized the Trump and Elon Musk efforts to make efficiencies.
Right. I've heard that criticism a lot since the 60 Minutes interview. And my belief is that if you go into the building every single day, you work 12 to sometimes 18-hour days for this administration, which I did. You're going into your office, you have a desk there, you have government issued, materials, laptop, phone, you travel with the administrator, you have meetings with them. I went to the office and worked there
Mm.
every single day, many times on the weekend, many times, on
I understand what
holidays.
you're saying, but
I
you don't think it was misleading then, Kristina?
No, I don't think it's misleading. I think most folks that work at USAID, especially in a support sense, under a contract, say that they work at USAID.
Fair
That's
enough.
the way that
Quick
it is in
response
the
from you, Scotty.
system.
So here's my thought on this, Christina. Obviously, like you said, you worked very hard, very dedicated to the prior administration. Coming into this new administration, you're correct. There are some people that are appointed and some people that are considered career. You are obviously under the career, but you were a contractor. I think that's where the question would be. And obviously, that's something conservatives, what Elon Musk has made it has not tried to hide it, that he believes that hiring these outside contract firms across all of government is what is costing the United States so much money. That's a waste of taxpayer dollars when you have capable people who are directly employed by the federal government, getting federal government benefits that you could utilize in those same positions. So I think, I sympathize definitely for all of those who've lost their jobs. Many of them were given 8-month severance packages, which most Americans in the private sector don't even get that option. But I think this was something to be, you can't just say that it was surprising. But my question that I would have for Christina in all of this is, okay, if you worked for so dedicated to the past administration and you're obviously so dedicated to USAID, it's been no secret that this administration believes a lot of waste has happened in USAID right now. Would you be able to actually do your job if you believed so much in USAID, something that it's been very clear that Donald Trump and Elon Musk believe is almost wasting more taxpayer dollars than doing good, wants to eliminate the department altogether almost?
Have you any examples of that, Scotty?
Well, I do, because I mean, you look at right now, you're looking at, first of all, just the easy one, $6 million for tourism in Egypt. I know a lot of the rural counties that would love to have tourism invested in them, but you look at $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala, $47,000 for transgender operations in Colombia, $32,000 for transgender comics in Peru. That's just the tip of the list. So all of this money was going out. You knew that was going to be eliminated. So, Christina, could you actually effectively do your job for an administration that calls all of that and all of your work the last 4 years or 2.5 years a waste?
So a couple of points there. First of all, USA does not fund any health operations related to sex changes at all. So most of those statistics are demonstrably false. I will say that I was hired to serve the American people in the capacity that I did, and I, as a dedicated public servant, am very committed to serving, the public. And I was prepared and willing to do that in my role, whoever the new administrator might have been. And I do believe that we could do that. I think also, to go back to your last point, that, there are people that are directly hired by the federal government and not contracted, therefore they could do the work. There is no way that the remaining federal direct hires could do all of the work that the contractors represented. The contractors represent, thousands of folks that did, good work every single day, necessary work, and could not immediately have been covered by the federal folks. That's not the way that it feasibly could have worked in any stretch of the imagination.
Kristina,
So you
quick question for you. Did you, when you were working there, ever spot any examples of wasteful spending?
No, I would say that we were limited. We could not even give our coworkers gifts that were over $15 because then it would have to be reported. So USAID is one of the most stringent oversight agencies
But,
in the government.
but
We have
perhaps
our
it's
own
So,
separate.
so
but
you're calling
perhaps
all these numbers fictitious? You're calling all these numbers that Elon Musk that are being published right now by our current administration, you're calling them just made up and fictitious, that they're just pulling them out and putting them out there? That's,
I will
that
say that
seems
I have personally, hold on, I have personally gone through the DOGE website and the savings on USAID, and the savings that Elon Musk says that from USA that DOGE has done are only, the actual savings are only 52% of the claim. Second of all, there are at least 66 projects on that list that Elon says has saved the American taxpayer a certain amount of money, and the actual savings are $0. So the numbers that Elon Musk and his folks are putting out are simply not trustworthy.
Christina, when DOGE
so.
says that USAID spent money on transgender operas in Colombia or DEI musicals in Ireland, are they lying or did that happen? And you just think it's a worthwhile way of spending the American taxpayers' money?
So those two examples did not happen. We don't operate in Ireland. Ireland does not need development assistance. That program was actually funded by the State Department.
Okay,
and
so
the
it
same
came
thing
from
in Colombia, that was funded by the State Department.
This is why people do not like the bureaucracy in DC. To talk about the details, like I said, you were a contractor, you were a federal employee. I get that detail. This is how they roped in different ways of taking money and putting them through different departments. But Christina, I go back to the fact of when did the Democratic Party become the party that believes in having big government? I mean, Bill Clinton himself was notorious for saying he wanted to cut, and he did cut 25% of the federal government, 100,000 employees. He made that one of his main reasons, and he got reelected and was popular in the United States because of it. We have bloated the federal government more than the private sector in all of it. So we can debate over whether who's telling the truth, who's not. But the reality of it was, you have to admit, our federal government has grown to a disproportionate size to where we can't even afford it anymore in the current state of the American economy.
So I can respond to that. First of all, it is demonstrably true that Elon Musk is lying about the numbers. That is absolutely true. Second of all, I'm not here to talk about a good faith effort to, support or reform the government. I think that whenever the American people mandate someone through an election, that needs to be respected. What I am here to do is to advocate for the importance of development and foreign assistance, and advocate for my colleagues and friends and fellow workers at USAID for the cruel way that they were treated and the absolute dismantling of an agency. It was not a good faith reform effort. These colleagues in our work are being slandered across the board in ways that are completely untrue. And now many of us are looking for jobs without severance, without benefits, without knowing what's next, and without somewhere to turn.
Christina, I noticed that at one of the press conferences we had a conversation between President Donald Trump and Elon Musk about the wealth of your previous boss. Let's just have a listen to that and then have your response.
Could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about 30 million,
right,
etc.?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened at USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But just there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it.
So, Christina, your boss's salary at USAID was something like $180,000, but she's reportedly worth about $30 million. Are you aware of those reports?
I am not aware of those reports. I know that she received a government salary through her job at USAID. I won't speak to her, personal finances.
Right.
I don't know them.
Okay, well, presumably if she accrued that much wealth, it was nothing to do with her position in government. Scottie, last word on that, and then we're going to move on.
It's not shocking that government officials leave DC a lot more with a lot more zeros in their bank account than when they came. But here's the reason why the federal employees who've been laid off, why their tears are just not making much of a storm. Because yesterday we saw Southwest Airlines have one of the largest layoffs they've ever had. Last week, Meta laid off 3,000 employees. Layoffs have been happening in the private sector for years based on the economy and the bad, poor choices, especially of this past administration. So right now, if anybody can advocate for jobs being cut, it will be definitely cut by the federal government. I think that's something that most Americans are united behind.
Scottie Nell Hughes and Kristina Drye, thank you both very much for appearing on the Nexus today. Really appreciate it. Well, according to Elon Musk, he's not doing anything unconstitutional. In fact, he's essentially following in the footsteps of Bill Clinton, the last US president to successfully balance the budget. Clinton also made massive cutbacks to the federal workforce.
Change must begin at the top. That's why I cut the White House staff by 25% and ordered federal agencies to cut billions of dollars in administrative costs and to trim 100,000 federal positions.
Well, my next guest, Niels Marquardt, joined the US Foreign Service well before Clinton and was an ambassador under his successor, George W. Bush. Welcome to the program, Niels. So how comes it's okay when Bill Clinton wants to make drastic cuts to the federal workforce, but not when President Donald Trump wants to do it?
Well, I think it's okay to do workforce reductions and to review priorities when a new administration comes in. That's really quite normal, and the professional civil and foreign service expect that and are willing to work with that. That's what happened with Bill Clinton. But you know what? The big difference is there wasn't a pause in programs, and people weren't immediately dismissed while that review was undertaken. So I think it's important to for the life-saving programs, for example, medical assistance to people in Africa, which was one of the programs that I oversaw in Madagascar as ambassador, not to end the program or to pause the program while you're deciding what you want to retain and what you want to discontinue. And then in terms of the actual workforce, these are highly skilled people with a lot of experience. They shouldn't just be dismissed and without a review and an understanding of what they do, what they bring to the table. So I would advocate a much more thoughtful and stepwise review rather than what we have seen in the last month.
In terms of life-saving critical operations, Marco Rubio, the head of the State Department, has said that it's fine for people to reapply, for those things to be reopened and for those operations to be exempt. Don't you think that's enough?
Well, it's been so herky-jerky so far. I mean, one day it's everything's suspended, then there's news from the Secretary of State, which was welcome, that there'd be a waiver. But my understanding, reading the traffic between various players in all this, is that there are a lot of people out there who just don't really understand what the decision is. It's a little bit like Elon Musk asking over the weekend for people to justify their existence with an email to their supervisor and to him. And then by Monday, the actual people in charge of the different agencies have said, no, don't just disregard that. This really creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of distraction. And, if you want efficiency in government, the last thing you want to do is have people wondering whether they're working or not.
Do you think that Trump's efforts or Elon Musk's efforts to streamline government appear more chaotic simply because we're in 2025 and not 1995, and we have social media and every single federal employee can complain about what's happening to them? Was there perhaps not the same level of complaints back in the 90s?
Normally in government, you have a deliberate process where instructions are reviewed and made sure that we understand the implications. And here, it's so easy to send a text that goes to the world and hasn't been completely thought through. So I think it's created a lot of chaos. It's created a lot of discontinuity, a lot of anxiety. None of that is conducive to efficiency, which is something we all want.
Whether it's the State Department or USAID or whatever it might be, things like transgender operas in Colombia, DEI musicals in Ireland, or trying to find out which makes the sunfish more aggressive, tequila or gin. Don't you think these things are quite wasteful, given that the US is $36 trillion in debt?
Well, I think those are sideshows. They're minor distractions. I mean, to me, the more important things are the really big ticket items that involve millions of people. What you just described to me isn't something I never was involved with in government, and probably wouldn't be involved with it today if I were still in government.
But it represents an
These are,
attitude. But it represents
distractions.
an attitude at the federal level that any amount of money can be spent on these things. When you have 500, 600,000 homeless and 500,000 and 600,000 drug addicts all over the streets, your infrastructure is lousy, you're in record debt, you can't spare a penny for these sort of projects, can you?
Well, I have no problem with them being discontinued, and I think the other things you just listed are much more important, and they are a focus of federal, state, and local government everywhere in our country right now. So
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
those things is not a problem.
Thank you. Niels Marquardt, thank you so much for your contribution today. Much appreciated. Now, here in Britain, some people have been looking across the pond rather enviously and are calling for the UK to have its own DOGE. For example, on Twitter or X, the Procurement Files account, which has over 40,000 followers, has been complaining about UK government spending. The Foreign Office awarded £50,000 or $60,000 of UK taxpayer money to study shrimp health in Bangladesh. Nearly £500,000 to buy 15 electric Porsches to be donated to Albanian prisons, part of a drive to net zero, although this was actually 15 electric VW vans, and about £9.5 million, $12 million, to support accountability and inclusion in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Joining me now to discuss that further is Michael Simmons from the Spectator magazine, who recently wrote an article in favour of the UK's own DOGE. Michael, welcome to the programme. So, what are you proposing over at the Spectator?
So we've launched what we're calling the Spectator Project Against Frivolous Funding. And basically, this is a database that lets Spectator readers or anyone with a computer come to our website and search through various sources of where government money is spent. So that might be foreign aid, it might be arts grants, it might be the government credit card. And basically, they can they can screenshot various examples, such as the ones you've highlighted, of what we're saying is frivolous government spending, just to really raise awareness of where taxpayer cash is going.
Well, Brits are being taxed more now than at any time since the Second World War, so it's rather painful, and we can't really go on like this.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. There's increasing demands on what the state wants to do. There's always calls for more money to the NHS. We've got a soaring welfare bill, and there's now demands, for more defence spending. So if we're going to have to increase funding in some areas, we're going to have to cut in others. And what we're saying at the Spectator is, before we do that, let's get rid of all this wasteful and inefficient spending, first.
It's interesting you mentioned Keir Starmer announcing that he's reducing overseas aid because, frankly, the fear of war, particularly with Russia, is making things become very real suddenly, and you have to prioritise.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it looks like, America is going to take less of a sort of global policeman role, which means that Europe and Britain are going to have to look after the state of their own defences themselves. And so that's why, Starmer's made that commitment. And part of where that funding is going to come from is this cut to foreign aid. And might I suggest he can use the Spectator's tool to look for some of these foreign aid projects that maybe should be cut.
What are the worst examples in that tool then?
Well, for me, it's actually some of the smaller amount of spendings, because although they're not game-changing amount of money, it goes to the attitude of some of the officials that are orchestrating these funds. So one of the things that we found was the Department for Work and Pensions, who administer Britain's benefit system. They spent £1,500 on this e-bike for someone that was out of work. So he said that it would help him find more work. And the fact that the average taxpayer is not being given bicycles by the government, but someone on benefits is, just struck me as like the attitude of where our spending is going is completely wrong. We spend millions of pounds on this international project to stop plastic pollution. And you might argue that that's a good thing, the taxpayer money should be going on. But that's not the part that Britain's playing in it. We're making sure that the process is done in an inclusive way. And, I would argue, why does getting rid of plastic pollution need to be inclusive? Surely we just get rid of the pollution. And if we're not worried about doing it in, a diverse and inclusive way, we can probably do it for a lot less cash.
Does this misspending or wasteful spending, as you'd put it, reveal a deeper truth about UK politicians and the respect or otherwise that they have for the people they govern?
Well, yes, I think it's not so much about the respect for the people they govern, but maybe there's a disconnect now between realizing that this is taxpayer cash they're looking after. And I think since COVID, when the demands and the size of the state sort of really increased, I think it's just been expected that they have to spend more and more. And as that's happened, state officials, civil servants have become more lax about where this cash is going.
There is already the National Audit Office. Is it not doing a good enough job to keep an eye on spending?
Well, the National Audit Office, in their defense, does a really good job. They bring in independent advisors and they look forensically through, all different parts of the state. But when they make recommendations, there's no requirement or really incentive for ministers to listen to them. So perhaps what we need to do is give the National Audit Office, stronger teeth, and maybe we should make the National Audit Office the UK's DOGE.
And maybe the head of that ought to be a ruthless businessman like Elon Musk. Do we have one in this country?
I'm not sure that a British equivalent really jumps out to me, but maybe we can find one.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Good luck with your efforts to spot wasteful spending in the UK government. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus, TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.